Welcome back, and we are, wow, Brad, we're almost there. We're on video number 9, 2 topics left, 2 questions left. And question number 9 that we'd like to answer for you on this video and really get you thinking and strategizing is, how will you get publicity? When you write that book, when you publish it, when you launch it, now you want to get people to buy it, you want to get people talking about it, you want to get some of that virility Brad talked about in the previous lesson. How can you get publicity? And we're going to talk about 2 concepts here. Well, it's one giant concept. We're going to break it into press releases and having your media pitch. Your press release was great, Brad. Why don't we start with that as an example, and we'll build from there. So talk about a little bit your press release, how it was titled, how it was written, because I think there are some very important lessons on how to do, and then for people that didn't follow your your format, how to not do press releases, because you can certainly waste a lot of money doing a really boring press release, which yours wasn't. So let's talk about it.
So yeah, again, this comes back to, this is similar to the book title discussion, right? You've got to be provocative here. Now, assuming you've already got a provocative book title, you need to create a press release that's equally, if not more, provocative. So in my book, I actually talk about how I dropped out of high school. And I actually encourage some people to do the same. I don't think that that's for everyone, and I'm not like everyone should leave high school, but I really have a negative opinion about public school. I believe that it's a training ground for factory workers, and that it's designed to train you to work in shifts and to train you to deal with office politics and all the other kind of shit that we deal with in life and in a job, in a crappy job. And I don't believe it's a great place for entrepreneurs to learn to become entrepreneurs. In fact, and again, I don't want anybody to hear this and be like, oh, Brad hates teachers or whatever, right? But like, when people who have a salary and a unionized job are teaching you, they're teaching you from their view of the world, which is a salaried unionized job. And they're not thinking like entrepreneurs. And that doesn't mean that they're bad teachers. That the lessons that they're teaching are there for them to teach, but they're certainly not teaching you to think like an entrepreneur. And again, that's not what this discussion is about, but that's why I say it. So I want people to hear this and be like, oh, Brad encourages everyone to drop out of school.
No, it's good, because you're laying the groundwork for what your press release was all about.
Yes, I am. So I basically wanted a headline for my press release that would be juicy. And I learned this the hard way. I've done press releases that were like, Canadian entrepreneur releases new business book. Would you open that? Would you click on that link? No.
I don't know anybody that would.
Okay. So what I came up with, in fact, I came up with the headline, and then I went to the writer, right? And you can brainstorm with if you have a good journalist you're working with, you can brainstorm your press release title with them. But the press release title I went with was, Canadian business author encourages students to smoke pot and drop out of school. Now, again, you have to be willing to go. You don't have to go as deep as I do in terms of controversy, but hey, it works, right? And a little SEO tip: publish the press release on your own website, your own blog, before you put it out on like PR web distribution or something like that. You'll get more Google love for that. Just a little tip. You'll be the first publisher of the content. It's a good little thing to do. And then, so normally people do the press release and they'll distribute it through PR Web or one of these other organizations, and then that's that. They'll stop. What you need to do is you need to print out your press release. You need to format it to the way it should be formatted. You need to FedEx that press release along with a copy of your book to various editors at different periodicals that you may want to pick up and talk about your book. You want to personally email that press release to your local news media, because they might be interested in the fact that you've written a book because it's local. You might want to forward it to podcasts. One of the things we did, now we paid for this, but one of the things we did on launch day was, who Kevin Smith is. He's a famous comedian. He has a very popular podcast. Someone suggested we advertise on his podcast. We got coverage on his podcast on launch day. But after the book was launched, I actually had an assistant who works for me contact all kinds of podcasts that were about everything from business to marijuana legalization and everywhere in between. Right? And there's like a huge gap in between those two. So there was a lot of leeway. So I'm talking to like college radio shows on the phone. I'm calling into like, the like National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws podcast. I'm talking to like Occupy Wall Street protesters. Like I'm all over the place on, with all these different places. But what we did was we sent them a copy of the press release along with an email. The press release was attached to an email that was the pitch. The pitch was, hey, and of course I had someone doing this for me. So she said, hey, my boss has just published his best-selling book. Here's a press release about the book. Here are the topics that he'd love to chat on your show. Doesn't have to be all about the book. Could be about business. Could be about entrepreneurship. Could be about working from home. Could be about pot. Whatever. He's willing to talk about these topics, and one by one they start calling back, and they do. But you have to go laser in, right? Every time I've done a proper press campaign, I've done the broadcast route, right? There's the shotgun approach, right? That only goes so far because everybody's doing the shotgun approach, right? So your press release gets stacked with so many others. It's very hard to get noticed with that shotgun approach. You might, but it's not as easy as it used to be. So have PR Web or one of these other distribution services fire the shotgun for you, but then pull out your sniper rifle and start finding individual places that you want to laser in on and go after. And those places are going to be more receptive because if you think it's right for them, they probably think it's right for them, right? So you're not going to get noticed by, like, if I do a press release through PR Web, and I can't, 100% of the time this isn't always true because it's happened to me where I've done a press release through PR Web, my local newspaper sends me an email saying I want a copy of the book so we can review it. Right? So that can happen, but for the most part, you have to go bang on their door. They won't notice the press release unless the right combo of words. Like, I'll give you an example. My wife Claire published her first vegan cookbook, and we did a press release, and it was actually a pretty boring press release. It was one of these, like, before we knew what we were doing with book launches, it was like, Canadian author releases vegan cookbook. It was like, that was the press release title. But we got all these replies from that. Because there were certain companies or certain organizations looking for vegan cookbook press releases. So Veg News, which is a physical magazine, goes out to 250,000 people, contacted Claire asking for 2 copies of her book so they could review it. So, of course, we dispatched 2 copies of the book to them, and a couple months later, boom, she had a glowing review in their magazine. Second time we did a press release for her second book, we actually went a little more controversial. She had a breakfast cookbook. She had cloned the Egg McMuffin and made it vegan. So that was the press release title was, vegan cookbook author clones clones a vegan Egg McMuffin. So I can't remember the exact words that we used, but something along those lines. Didn't get the requests from the magazines. We had to go banging on their doors and say, hey, we got another cookbook. Oh, really? Okay. So don't always expect your phone to ring. Pick up the phone and make some calls or get on email and get in people's faces. You need to actually pitch. You need to sell your stories.
I think, that's probably one of the best pieces of advice on this entire course, because I think a lot of people fall into that trap that, well, I've done all these things that I'm supposed to do, and I put the press release out, and I have a website. Why is nothing happening? I put a YouTube video up. There's a YouTube video. Why is the phone not ringing? And
Yeah.
it's quite the opposite. And that's the importance of one of the first videos we talked about, which is knowing your topic and your position and your background. You need to be able to get behind this and be passionate about it, and to tell as many people as you can, and to really sell it. Because in some cases, and probably in most cases, that's going to be the thing that makes or breaks your book. Now, of course, your press release for the Chronic Marketer was probably controversial enough to get you lots and lots of calls, but still, you talked about, you had a staff member, you had somebody working for you, banging on a lot of these other doors to get you, these podcast opportunities or exposure opportunities, and that in itself is a great tip, because even think 20 years ago, or if you had a new book, you'd be calling up radio stations and trying your best to get interviewed. Now there are so many forms of communication. There's so many of these, alternative forms of media where you can get in front of audiences that never existed before. So it's never been easier to get exposure to your book. And it's a matter of doing everything that Brad's recommended on this. And just podcasts alone could probably make or break your audience. Never mind the fact that you could also be getting into newspapers and on TV and on radio stations. Now you've got all these other opportunities as well with blogs and podcasts. So it's really, I think it's a matter of, how bad do you want it? If you're going to hustle for it, there's a very good chance with a good press release, with a good book, that you're going to find that audience. You're going to find people that want to know more about what you're doing if you put all these pieces into play that Brad has suggested here.
And don't frame this stuff like cold calling, right? Don't think of it as like you would cold calling customers. When you're cold calling the media, that one opportunity, that one yes, right? If you made 100 requests in a day and only got 2 responses that said yes, those 2 responses are going to be so valuable to you that it was worth the entire day of rejection, right? It's because you're going to get a lot of people responding to you saying not interested, go away, all that kind of stuff. They get inundated with these requests. Don't let any of those deter you from continuing, and don't be afraid to get 100 no's and 1 yes. Like, that's an extreme. It's not going to happen that way, but don't be afraid for it to happen that way, because that 1 yes will outweigh all those rejections.
Yeah, what a solid piece of advice there. So yeah, be willing to do what it takes. Anything to add?
No, I think that's good.
There you go. So how will you get publicity? Video number 9. There's your answer, and 1 video left. We'll see you in just a moment.